Hello there, YouTube crew. I'm the real Dill, and today, of course, we're going to be talking about John Wick. It's another globe-trotting action epic from the acclaimed franchise that has it all: incredible stunts and choreography, chases on horseback, bike, and car, various guns complete with explosive shotgun shells, and blades of all sorts. It's even got nunchucks. Great falls, as in a person falling down or off of something. Well, maybe one or two too many. Beautiful sets and locations, more of that wiki and world building. A blind man martial artist who rivals even John Wick himself. And that foot chase and fight with Scott Adkins' Killa character, man, that's worth the price of admission itself. This movie, by and large, is exactly what I wanted out of Chapter 3. I mean, besides the great action that movie has, character wise and definitely story wise, it was basically a waste of time, in my opinion. This movie, Chapter 4, could be a good send off to the character, but there is a little wiggle room where they could continue John Wick if they wanted. So if you love John Wick and you haven't seen this movie, what are you waiting for? And if you haven't ever seen a John Wick movie, well, watch at least 1 and 2 and then buy your ticket for this weekend. So I recommend the movie. I think it's really good. I wouldn't say it's the best of the franchise. I still put 1 and 2. One, because it's got better motivation. Two, because uh, the climax of the movie I think is better than the original movie. This one and the third one I think struggle with not motivating John to the best that they can. It's hard to beat the first one, but there's a nugget in John Wick 3 that if they had capitalized on, it would have been a really great motivation for John Wick and for a action hero in general. I think it's a very interesting thing to do. So if you'd like to hear more on that in my notes on John Wick 4, well, stick around because I got some gripes and complaints. Starting small, there's two falls that really pushed the line and just became way too noticeable and broke up the action more than it should have. And that one was a fall out of a building onto a van, and then he just dents the heck out of the van and then gets up and just kind of keeps on walking. And then another one where it's not the big fall down the church steps, but it's because that it is kind of humorous, and then it just sets up this, oh well, how can he come back up from it? And you lean into the teamwork with his rival or two of his rivals, uh, to get up to the duel, right? But the second fall after that, it's like, come on, John, come on. It's just like we don't want to need to see that. And bouncing off that, there is the main goon, I guess. He should have died in that building before the van fall. He should have died there. Like, I understand that they kind of wanted to, I guess, push off the trackers, how he feels about John, but it made most sense to do it right there in the very moment, saving the dog. And then him come around. I mean, basically, none of the action would really change, none of the story would really change, but the impact of that moment would have been increased, and you could have had anybody kick John down the steps. I do have a nitpick with the finality of this movie. So it it kind of goes with, John takes on a lot of damage, and most of the time he can take a nap or maybe even less and come back into the fight. But with the duel, he goes in basically just bruised up and a little tired, and he gets shot in the arm, gets shot here, and gets shot in the abdomen, and supposedly dies. It just doesn't feel like a death befitting John Wick, especially like, a gut wound shouldn't kill you that quick most of the time. Maybe if it was a liver shot that hit a major artery in there, but it's regardless, it doesn't feel right for John. Like maybe if you'd have shot him in the chest cavity, maybe it'd have paid off. Maybe it'd been a slightly more believable end. Um, but if they wanted to go that way, they could have just, since he fights half of Paris to get there, like you could have just added in some more wounds to his body that he's like half patched. That could have been another element that they added into the fight choreography where he's not only just mowing through people, switching guns, going through cars, but he's also having to slightly repair himself as it's going on. So they could have been an element to it, and the he could have died from blood loss. That would have made that final moments. And also, I really wish he'd have pulled out a picture of his wife. When he, right before he slumps over, and it would have been a nice little moment to have the wind pick up the picture and carry it away. I felt that would have elevated that little moment a lot more. But as it is, the final shot of the movie with what they gave us should have just been that restored Mustang driving off to into the sunset. That's what the final shot should have been with what they shown us. Plus, even though you don't see Leguizamo, at least you'd know Leguizamo's character restored the Mustang. This one ties in with chapter 3. The guy above the table, the elder, useless, meaningless character. I mean, why even have him? You could have got the information, the plot device from any other character. He has no real purpose to be there, no real addition to the mythos, right? The only way I think he would work as a character, as a figure in this underworld, is if he was to repurpose John's wrath to restructure the criminal underworld. That's the only way I see him working. Or if you know uh winston Winston was using John to leapfrog the table to this position, that would have been interesting. Especially so I really wish in chapter 3, with Winston betraying John, I really wish that was a bit more colder. I really wish it made you feel like, oh, since the very first movie when John comes into that club scene, Winston's been making this, you know, uh, making this plan up, making this use John to get to here. And it really would have made an interesting antagonist in this movie, or since they roll everything back with, that's also a thing that I didn't like about this movie. They just rolled everything back with Winston, and he didn't have to do much to get back into John's graces. And fine, whatever. But you can't have that happen. And Sharon, Sharon, you can't have him be perfectly okay with him doing that to John. Uh, and them just roll it back easy. Like they either had to be in that, together as like big moves ahead, or Sharon should have been nagging him about betraying John like that. But I wouldn't want to see Winston become a full villain. But chapter 4, him taking on the slot of Elder and, you know, forcing his thumb over John to get that, where John would want to kill Winston but can't, and has to help him rise up to get out cleanly. That would have been interesting. I would have liked that a lot, and it really would have added some nuance and different sides, different aspects to Winston that would have been really fun to see. Would have been very interesting, and it would have really helped complete the mythos of the John Wick franchise. I think it would have. I think that would have been probably the best way to do the franchise and to do Winston, but they clearly didn't want to make him villainous at all. So why do the portrayal? So yeah, like I said earlier, like chapter 3, character wise, like you get one nugget from John, I'll speak on later. But like, Winston's betrayal, just not only that, but like the whole his standing with Continental is completely reverted back to the start of chapter 3. So like it's just like the whole story is just a wash. The way the Marquis deals with him at the beginning of this movie might as well be how the how he was treated post chapter 2, like what he did with the excommunicado by postponing it and giving him an hour to run away. Like that, this the consequences of that might as well have been what the Marquis doles out the destruction of the Continental for. And then on top of that, you have the character of Zero, who's this. It was sort of interesting dynamic in how he's just this fanboy of John. But my problem with that is, so throughout the franchise, you've had John give people professional courtesies, and by that I mean it's like, hey, I like you, we can fight to the death and I'll kill you, or you can save yourself. That's my professional courtesy. And it never made sense to me that he kills Zero towards the end of chapter 3. Zero seemed like the guy that he just, beat him down and then pat him on the cheek and say, maybe next time you'll get me. So, with the big wash that chapter 3 is, besides the action, I would say this movie should have started with, that escape from New York, and then just time jumped and he's been at the Osaka place, the Continental at Osaka. And he should have been there for a while. We don't see it for a while. We see the final night essentially, but what the movie shows is he's only just shown up, and then the Marquis men come up there. He should have been there for a good bit as a recovery, and also, like, you have the father and daughter that run the place, and I really like the dynamic where they're kind of playful about being father and daughter in their roles that they have. But so she has a problem with his connection to John and that they need to get ahead of it, right? But I feel like it'd just been a lot more tangible if she was feeling the toll of harboring John. And I think the dynamic would be where she's not very open to her father, that exactly how she feels. She's more hinting, and he's can kind of see it and shuts it down before she can get the courage to say more. But then when she's with John, you need to get the heck out of here. But before that conversation reaches its completion, all the men have shown up anyway. I feel like that would have made it that a lot stronger. And but of course, between the escape from New York and Osaka, you would have the introduction of Kane, and or before the introduction of Kane, you'd have the Marquis showing up to slap Winston's wrist, destroy the Continental, and then introduce Kane, and then we start the Osaka basically as is, except that John's been there for a while. About the daughter, we get to see her spout off that she doesn't like John, that she way too many times. Like, you needed to be more reserved with the father, where she doesn't outright say it. Then with John, she's direct about it. And then that final scene they have, it just, we've already seen her do it so many times that it doesn't mean anything. I think the height of it would have been, right before the Marquis men, and then after her father's death, it should be, if you don't kill Kane, I will. More than, I hate you, John. or rather, I think it'd been more interesting if, after I kill Kane, I'm going to kill you. That would, just that line would have been like, just silence in that line would have been how their interaction should have played out. And another small nitpick, this one being with the tracker, I wish they had pushed it a little further that, hey, he's the new generation's John Wick. Kane, he's the new top guy. I mean, it's shown that he could have killed John a couple times, But I really like the what keeps him from doing it is he's looking for that just the right price, you know, because the hint is that he's trying to find a way out too, but he's wanting that last big. This is the number I'm looking for, and then I can retire. And pushing a little further, you know, they had it with the scene where he's sitting next to Kane before he talks to the Marquis and makes a deal he shouldn't have. I wish they just pushed it a little further. That he's trying the wedge he's trying to get out is exactly what's putting him under the thumb, enslaving him to the system more. Because that directly links to John Wick and Kane's struggle in the movie, or John Wick's struggle in the franchise, actually. Um, I just pushed it a little further. It was mostly there, but it could have been, just even stronger. That's Everybody's saying that John Wick 4 is the best, or a lot of people are saying that John Wick 4 is the best. It's the best action movie of the year. But there's just little things that really could have made this movie the best of the franchise. And because they aren't there, I'd still put 1 and 2 slightly above it. So that one thing that I really liked about John in John Wick 3 is I think it's when he's talking to the elder. The elder's probed him, like, what is your purpose, John? And he his finally, like, seeing why he's so driven is that after he dies, there's no one left to remember his wife, so he's fighting to remember his wife. And, like, bam, like, I really like that. I think that was a fantastic motivation for John, and they just don't do anything with it. And in this movie, he's constantly asked, what's the end? What is the end of this? What do you want, John? And it's like, well, he kind of answered that in the last movie, and then he's not given an answer. And I really would have liked, a full, like, return to, or call back to, people keep asking if I'm back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. I would have really, instead of that, like, rage moment, I think it would have been very fitting to have that, because you have the hero's character. He asks them. You have a couple other characters, Winston and uh, the king, the Bowery King, Lawrence Fishburne's character. Everybody's kind of asking him, what do you want out of this? What are you motivated by? And it would have been great to, in the scene with Kane, at when he lights the candle for his wife, that would have been the scene to bring that back. I'm fighting to remember, and it would have been even elevated further if that followed the Marquis talking to the main henchman about 3 types of people. I believe it's those who have a reason to kill, those who have a reason to die, those who have a reason to live. And Kane has all 3, John has none. And then you follow that up with John lighting the candle, Kane coming by, like, you know, only the living matter, the dead can't hear you. And John retorting with what his, like, I just want somebody, there's got to be somebody to remember my wife. And it ties into, if there's something written on my tombstone, I want it to be loving husband. you know so it just, that needed to be the moment that it's like, oh, okay, John does still have something to fight for, and it's something, it's intangible, but we all understand what that, it's it might be intangible, but it's deeply rooted. And I just, that's exactly what John is missing in this movie. He's missing a proper motivation, and that was it. It was already established. Bring it back. Act like you're doing it for the first time, because you might as well be. And also, it retroactively, bolsters to. I mean, like, there's a great moment in 2 where, like, after he steals his car back, it's destroyed in the process. But when he returns home, he opens the glove box, and in the glove box, he pulls out a card that has his wife's picture, the last note she wrote him, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. He's, like what drives him at the end of the first movie. He's watching the last video he has of his wife, that beautiful moment on the beach, before the sickness took her, and that gets him back up. He's bleeding out, but watching that video, it's like, all right, I gotta live. That ties everything up in the franchise. This is what John's deal is all about, and it's like, man, why did you not put that into the movie? why did John? He's questioned by it. He's at this point he should have some introspection on it. He should understand it. Make it the thesis of the movie. Uh, it's just, it bothers me that they left that out, and there's a bit of hollowness to the movie because of it. But it was already there. They already thought of it in chapter 3. Just commit to it, flesh it out. Also, like, with that being spoken to Cain, that really, calls back to their history of friendship, and it, build it like adds to that as well. But also, like, I would love, after that admission, that's kind of the zenith of the scene, and then it starts to calm down. You pull in on Cain, focus on Cain, probably have a neutral face until he looks back to John, and I would cut to the next scene, and that would be the kind of like, oh, I think they got together and planned how they were going to kill the Marquis and get both of their freedom out of it. You know, basically how the movie ends. But like it could have been a great moment where Cain goes in there. He's basically wanting John just like not fight. Maybe you can play him as he's not concerned, but there is deep concern within him. Like, I'm facing John Wick, and I'm facing him for my daughter's freedom, and so that's what he's going in there for, and pressuring him. And then when John pushes back on him, he's like, okay. And then there's the idea, and you just stop before it's shared. Just like as the kernel is first cracked, and he turns to John for the proposal. That would have been a neat little moment, especially on rewatch, because that would be a moment on rewatch where like, oh, they knew what they were going to do before the duel. Okay, yeah, that I feel like that should be how the movie had worked. One final nitpick. Okay, it should have been very clear what time John left the sewers, because it almost seems like midnight hasn't even come around and he's servicing in Paris, and it's like, dude, like, take some time, man. Get some sleep. you know, get some rest before this big event. But I guess I would say it would take place at 5, maybe a little after 5 when he surfaces, because sunrise is at 6:03. That would be my assumption. It was just at 5 is when he left, but like they didn't show you that's when he left, so it feels jarring when he does. Uh, just like close up of the watch, or close up the watch, look at a tower clock, something. Because I mean, we do bring that in, but by the time we bring in an actual look at the watch where you can see the time, it's very close to sunrise, and you just needed that established as he's surfacing to Paris. It just that was because it really it really messes up the momentum to me, because I was like, why is he going out there now? But like knowing retroactively, it's like, oh, okay, it makes sense now. But it should have just always made sense. Okay. Now, if you stuck around, what did you think of the movie? Do you share any of my thoughts? Do you disagree with me somewhere? Let me know in the comments below. I'm the real deal. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.